A Nobel Prize for one of President Bush's fiercest critics. Are his political views likely to affect politicians' approval ratings at this critical time? And does his award add more weight to his views on the political scene? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I am Hashim Al-Barra. Paul Krugman, one of George Bush's most vicious of critics, has won the Nobel Prize for Economics. The award comes as the president's approval ratings hit the lowest of his term. It's also prompted the Republican Party to claim the Nobel Committee is politically motivated. Bethan Howe reports on the newspaper columnist and lecturer who's making international headlines.
Let me bring it to Paul Krugman. You wrote on Friday.
He's accused the Bush administration of being untrustworthy and disastrous. This week, Paul Krugman was recognized internationally as one of the leading thinkers in his field of economics.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel 2008 to Professor Paul Krugman, Princeton University, Princeton, USA.
A well-known columnist and professor, Krugman was humble on receiving the prize. He didn't miss the opportunity to share his opinions on the latest developments in the world financial crisis.
Look, I don't think I should say very much now. It's an incredible honor. It's stunning. It doesn't quite settle in. Yesterday was the first day I actually felt that policymakers exceeded expectations instead of falling short.
The professor was awarded the Nobel Prize for his work analysing international trade that dates back to the 70s. But it's his twice-weekly column in the New York Times and frequent appearances on television that have given him public notoriety. Since the beginning of the Bush presidency, Krugman has been critical of the regime. In 2002, he said Mr. Bush retains a public image as a plain-spoken man, when in fact he is as slippery and evasive as any politician in memory. And just last year, he wrote that the president degraded our government and undermined the rule of law. He said he has led us into strategic disaster and moral squalor. But the Nobel Laureate is full of praise for the response by some European leaders to the global economic situation.
Gordon Brown comes up with a plan that does seem to be aimed at the right problem, and 5 days after announcing the plan, the money is already flowing. This is the kind of action we need to see.
The award could bring Paul Krugman and George Bush together, as Nobel Prize winners are usually invited to the White House, although there's been no comment from the Oval Office. Now, at such a critical point in the US presidential campaign, observers will be watching closely to see how much Krugman's award may influence public opinion before the 4th of November vote. Bethan Howe for Inside Story.
Joining us to discuss this issue are our guest in Stockholm, Bertil Holmlund. He is chairman of the Nobel Prize Committee for Economic Sciences. And in Sacramento, David Anderson. He's an assistant professor of government at California State University, Sacramento, specializing in the politics of Nobel Prizes. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for joining us. Let me start by asking Mr. Bertil in Stockholm. I know that you take into account many criteria to decide this is the man of the year. But to what extent has the financial crisis bolstered the chances of Krugman?
It has had no effect at all, really. These prices are sort of gradually discussed over the years, so the current crisis has had no effect at all.
So it was basically because of his long experience and contribution to the field of economics that was the main reason behind the choice.
Yes, but in specifically his contributions to trade theory and to economic geography.
All right. David Anderson, did you expect the announcement of the award to Paul Krugman to produce such fireworks internationally?
Well, I think the first thing that should be pointed out is that when we're talking about the politics of the Nobel Prize, where we generally see controversy arises in the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize, which is given out by the Norwegian Nobel Committee, not the Swedish. And so it's rare, especially in the academic prizes, except for the case of literature, to see political controversy emerge because of a prize. Obviously, because of Krugman's platform within the New York Times and his criticisms of the Bush administration, I think it's expected that some of his critics are going to be critical of the awarding of his prize, but I don't know if they have much of an argument.
Mr. Holmlund, how do you respond to that? I mean, Krugman has been definitely given more platform than anybody else, and maybe he was heavily publicized worldwide because of his column in the New York Times and also access to television. Was this one of the reasons that impacted your decision?
I think actually the prize has been well received in the academic community, and there is no question about his qualifications as an academic researcher. He has really done extraordinary work in his fields. But you have to realize that the prizes in economics have been controversial before Krugman. We have had prizes to people more right-wing leaning than Krugman in the past, and that has been controversial as well. So this is not really unusual to have controversies to some degree around prizes in economics.
Indeed, it was very controversial since the 1976 award given to Friedman. Mr. Anderson, now do you think that Krugman's views on global trade will have more weight after he has joined the pantheon of Nobel Prize winners?
Well, there's a huge amount of prestige that's associated with the Nobel Prize in any field, and Nobel laureates have a long history of using their status as Nobel laureates to give themselves credibility in political arguments that they're making. For example, at the 100th anniversary of the Nobel Prize, a large group of Nobel laureates signed a joint statement to say that the world needs to address issues such as global warming, issues such as poverty, issues such as nuclear disarmament. It wasn't just the Peace Prize laureates that had signed that document, laureates from all the different fields. And so they were using their credibility as Nobel laureates to try to give themselves a larger platform. In the United States as well, Nobel laureates are often seen to use their status as a laureate to affect policy. For example, a number of, I think 10 Nobel laureates of economics signed a statement prior to the George Bush tax cuts to say that they didn't think it was a good idea economically. And obviously, no one has heard of any of these laureates before, and they're using their status as a Nobel laureate to be able to get leverage with their political arguments. Now, Krugman's different because Krugman, he already has a platform. He writes 2 times a week in the New York Times. How much more credibility the Nobel is going to give him than that platform, that I think we'll have to wait to see.
All right, it remains to be seen then. Let's go a little bit into details. Mr. Holmlund, Krugman is best known for his economies of scale, that lower cost resulting from increased production. What kind of impact has it had on globalization and global trade?
I don't think the theory as such has really affected trade, but it has helped us understand the trade that takes place. But it probably has had very little effect on actual trade policy or trade in itself.
All right. Mr. Anderson, while Krugman has been very critical of the way the US administration responded to the financial crisis, he praised Gordon Brown's government, saying that he was very swift and head-on. How much of that is politically motivated and how much of that was very objective judgment?
Well, I would have to defer to Paul Krugman for that, but I would say, reading his writings the last few weeks with regards to the financial crisis, he was, he was making lucid and coherent arguments, and I think he plays an important role. He came to the New York Times to provide a column that had a focus on economics, so that on the opinion page there was someone who had deep knowledge about economic issues that can but who also has the ability to write in a way that the general public can understand some complex problems. I think he's actually been quite a resource in the United States as someone who has been able, as a public intellectual, to be able to explain difficult economic concepts in a way that someone who's not trained in economics can understand.
All right.
I think his column in that sense has been valuable.
Time for a short break. When we come back, how is the public reacting to the Krugman's views on the latest financial crisis? Stay with us.